be presenting on this agenda item.
Remy, should we have a roll call first for the record?
Yes, I suppose that is actually the first order of business. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have a roll call. Amy, would you please do a roll call?
Yes, I will. Mayor Drabkin.
Here.
Commissioner Tankersley.
Here.
Commissioner Tate.
Here.
And Commissioners Gormley and Christensen are excused today.
Thank you. So our report was from Jamie Phillips, but just with my power of observation, I now see we have Jamie on the line as well as John Dietz. So I don't know if you are going to both present on this or if one or the other of you would prefer to present the agenda item.
So maybe what I'll do is I'll just kick it off and then hand it over to Jamie. So this is like an unusual occurrence for BPA. Doesn't happen very often. The last time I think we had a major RDC was back in 2006. And we had a little bit, BPA had $14 million they distributed last year, which translated into, I think, a couple $100,000, if I remember right, for water and light. So this is something that is triggered when BPA has revenue above rate case. And this is part of our contract, our power resource, our power contract with BPA. So this is from the power side. This is BP 24, which is the power. There's two contracts, power and transmission. And pretty much the public utilities actually negotiated this agreement with BPA. And so maybe I'll stop there and let Jamie take it from there.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the Commission's accommodation for this special meeting. We have a relatively short timeline to respond to BPA on the proposed rate case settlement. So to provide some context, as John mentioned, every 2 years, BPA conducts rate proceedings to establish power and transmission rates. In the spring of this year, that process was kicked off with customer engagement and workshops. Then in August, and this is for fiscal years 2024 and 2025, so looking a few years out, in August, BPA paused the proceedings to initiate discussions for a settlement. And I think perhaps the settlement came as BPA gained more clarity on their end of year financial position, which was projecting and is projecting a significant revenue surplus, largely a result of favorable water conditions combined with higher market prices. And so being in that position, BPA proposed a settlement and gave customers an opportunity for feedback and comment on their initial proposal, and then came back with their latest proposal that you have in your packet on September 21st. The settlement offer is substantially consistent with the counter proposal that Public Power submitted. Groups like PPC and NRU took the lead in sort of representing customers. McMinnville's a member of both of those organizations. And as John mentioned, the settlement is two parts. First being the rates settlement, which addresses a few things, and that's the power and transmission rates for the next rate period through 2025, and also the implementation of the reserves distribution clause for 2022, and then also the average system cost review process, which pertains to residential exchange. And then the second settlement is the terms and conditions for the transmission tariff. and there's nothing of note, no big changes. Within the rate settlement, the two big items that I'll mention is the reserve distribution clause, which will distribute approximately, well, $350 million of surplus revenue back to power customers as rate relief in 2023. McMinnville's estimated portion of that is about $5.6 million. And that, as I was mentioning to Tom a minute ago, is about 1.6 million higher than BPA's initial settlement proposal. So that just attests to the power of the joint power customers and their counter proposal. The settlement will also establish power and transmission rates, and for 24 and 25, initial modeling is showing stable rates. McMinnville is actually projected to have, on average, about a 0.5% decrease in our rates for the next 2 years. So overall, the settlement represents a greater value to customers than would probably be achieved otherwise through the full rate case process. And in addition to those immediate benefits of the reserve distribution, we have that certainty for the next 2 years on our power and transmission rates. Also attached in the packet is some information from the Public Power Council, sort of outlining what I've just shared, along with some further detail. BPA is requesting that participants in the settlement discussions respond by Thursday, October 6th at 12 p.m. to either support, not oppose, or object to any aspect of the settlements. And for any objections, provide reasons. And then should the settlement proceed, BPA will issue their initial proposal in December, and that will follow the typical 7I process with the Federal Register notice, as we've seen in, as they're obligated to do in rate cases. And then the final record of decision would come next summer as usual. So I'll pause for a moment if there's any questions or if you want me to elaborate on any of the components.
I have some questions right off the bat. I'm not sure about other commissioners. I'll start with mine, and then so with that timeline, with the December timeline, when do you anticipate seeing these dollars coming back in?
So for the reserve distribution, that will begin in December. So the December initial proposal is for BP 24 and 25 rates. The reserve distribution will come ahead of that, starting in December through September. So for 10 months, we will receive that revenue as a reduction to our power bill.
Okay. And then what about the pass through on some of those? What about the pass through on like a rebate going specifically to industrial customers?
Mm-hmm. So the industrial customers have contracts that fully pass through BPA costs. And so the steel mill and Airgas will see about half of that pass through directly to them as an offset to their power bills on a monthly basis. And the distribution customers will realize the benefit of the remainder.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I have some follow-up, but let me just start by saying I think this generally is great for everybody who's paying a utility bill. So I just want to acknowledge that, and then go to other commissioners for questions. And then I have some follow-up questions about how that gets applied. And I, of course, am specifically thinking about how this affects the pilot going to the city As former Mayor Scott Hill used to say, on my back of the napkin, math would tell me if the 5.6 million came in all at one time, that would mean about a $250,000 reduction to what the city was anticipating bringing in revenue from the pilot. Since it's not going to be all at that same time, it adds some additional layers of complication, especially while the pilot is being implemented with industrial ratepayers at it's in this phased in approach. And so depending when those rebates are coming, it's going to affect what phase of pilot we're at. So I'd like to circle back to that, but not take over off in this other direction. So just noting that I'd like to come back and talk about that some more. Commissioner Tankersley, Commissioner Tate, do you have questions or comments at this time?
Kathy, you want to go first?
No, I appreciate the questions that you brought up, Mayor. And my understanding is that we are going to have time as a commission a little bit later to talk more about what this means as far as how Water and Light is going to look at the funds that come back and how they flow. But I guess I thought that maybe that was going to come a little bit later in a different capacity. And let me know if that was the thinking or not around that.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll come back later with some recommendations for the commission to consider on what to do with those funds.
So to make sure I understand, it's my understanding that those recommendations would only have to do with basically our distribution, non-industrial customers related amount, about half of it.
Correct.
As I understand it, the half that goes to Cascade, as the bill gets reduced under the contract, we have the contract with them, their bill gets reduced. So there's nothing we don't have anything to do about that other than just to follow the contract. Is that right, Jamie or John?
Yes, that's correct.
So the question is, what do we do? Our question would be, what do we do with the other half? And it sounds, listening to Remy, it sounds as if the city would like us to decide sooner rather than later so they can look at it in their budget process. But I think it's important we think about it because this is a windfall, or it, in a sense, it's a windfall, but it's, I mean, I see sort of balancing one, maybe the customer should get the money back. On the other hand, maybe this is something we could use to set aside for something and spend on something that we really need on the electrical side, and which we decide on that, I think will make a difference to the city.
Yeah, and specifically the thing where I don't have clarity is, so if we're charging this pilot, 3%, 4.5%, 6%, but then these rebates are rolling in, I am not sure. I don't yet have clarity about how that affects those overall numbers. And I really want city staff and Water and Light staff to work hand in hand to make sure there's a lot of clarity, because I think that lacking clarity on the front end of this will, only potentially lead to continued more conflict, and as we know has existed, and great effort here to move beyond it. But knowing that Water and Light staff are the experts in this realm, and that we have this big change happening in terms of the pilot, in terms of industrial users, and that this affects it, I just want to make sure that we're proactively communicating between these two organizations to make sure that there is good understanding, so that there are not surprises, whether those are budget increases or decreases, but that all parties can plan appropriately, our industrial users, Water and Light, and the city of McMinnville.
So, Jamie, perhaps you could put together, and I don't know if we have I guess we do have when the pilot increases, don't we? We know when that would happen. So you could put together a projection maybe, and, as we used to say in algebra class, show your work, and then send it to the city as to what we think will be each month. Because I assume BPA would, over the 10 months, each would be 10% of the amount of Cascade share of the rebate, right?
Well, that would be the simplest application, but that's not exactly how they'll do it. It's based on system shape for the months. So
Okay.
output of the hydro system, but we should have that in November.
Okay, great. So it sounds as if Remy would like you to put together something now that says this is subject to change because of the way they calculated, but if it were going 10% a month, this is what the number would be. Would that be helpful, Remy?
Yeah, well, I think what would be great is to actually get staff in the room talking as opposed to saying, put together this memo and then there's this back and forth where we're not having great clarity or that it's kind of the ball is moving back and forth between camps. What I would really like to see is that we sit down together, unified, recognizing the great benefit to all of our, to everybody that's involved in this situation, and also have a dialogue where we talk about, hey, what could this mean? Absolutely have numbers prepared in advance for what you anticipate and what you know, but that we have a real live dialogue, not emails, not memos. I'd like us to have a conversation with the people that are most involved, where we can talk about whatever questions come up, work out any issues, and make sure that everybody is very clear, because we've just experienced so much with miscommunication really over the last number of months. And I think that this is, here's another large impact, and this is another large impact on the city budget, which we all know is hurting at this point. And while this is great for ratepayers, this is still taking, the effect is going to be a reduction in how much revenue the city receives. And so we're already struggling to balance that budget. So really what I am asking for, and what I would like to be very clear, is that we get city staff and water and light staff in the room having a discussion for clarity so that everybody can be prepared and move forward thoughtfully.
Remy, I would like to see the rough estimate. Do you think that should be shared with the city staff before this meeting, or just come into it cold?
Well, as always, Chair, I think the best things we can do are communicate and be transparent and then accountable. So, I think if you have documentation prepared to send over, that's great. But I just don't want to leave it that prepare a white sheet, send it over, and then that's the end of the story. I want to make sure that we're treating this differently.
I understand that. I just want to make sure you weren't saying don't prepare the sheet and don't send it over first, because you want to have it just all discussed.
No, I want to bring as much information to the table so we can have a very well-informed discussion, and everybody can flush out their questions, and we can get through any misunderstandings, hopefully on the front end, or any potential misunderstandings that can come in just written correspondence.
So can you think of anything that Jamie and staff could send over that would be more helpful than the explanation that it probably won't be 1/10 each month, but
well, I think even that's good information, because, for instance, that's not in the packet. So currently, city staff would have access to the same information that we had before this. I mean, they could also watch this presentation, but sharing as much information about what's anticipated and how that flows through. I think everything that you're presenting to the commission should be shared with city staff who will be working with these numbers as well.
Okay, so I think we can probably put something together, and we can even look at our past load shapes to see and give us kind of an estimate on a monthly basis.
And Jamie, my suggestion would be also that you make very clear that this is only for the industrial contract customer part, and that the commission has to decide what's going to happen with the others, and that decision will impact whether it affects the pilot or not.
Okay. Yes, I can separate those revenue streams for the contract customers and distribution, and apply the variables I have today to next year. Would it be helpful to have scenarios? If the settlement does not proceed, the whole picture could change. So I guess there'll be some assumptions included.
Yeah, that's great. So if you could explain that the settlement may not proceed, and then it's all up in the air again, please. That would be a good thing to put in there too.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, what I don't want is that you're relying on me to be the pass-through of information, because I am not you. I am not an expert in this. I am not working on it every day. And I don't want there to be any mixed messaging. And so it's a major impact on the city budget. And so it's very important for those operations that city staff is aware of the potential, whether or not it actualizes, of the potential major impact on city revenue.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Any other questions or comments, Chair Tankersley or Commissioner Tate?
No.
Okay. And then, Jamie, I don't believe you were really finished with your presentation. You said I'll pause there and take questions. You might be regretting that decision now, but
no, this is great. Great conversation. So next I would just present the options to the commission for the decision today. So staff has been part of the PPC discussions, Public Power Council, and shares their sort of position here, which is to not oppose both settlements, the BP24 rate settlement and the TC24 tariff settlement. However, the commission has the option to either, on each of the settlements, to either support, not oppose, or object. And then, so what I'm looking for is a motion, two motions to that effect, as well as direction and authority for the general manager to respond back to BPA the decisions of the commission by the deadline of October 6th at 12 p.m.
I would entertain a motion, unless there's further discussion. Sorry.
Real quick discussion. John, you were involved in this at the PPC level, right?
Correct.
Okay. And it makes sense to you that we would take the recommendation, staff recommendation, of course, but take the recommendation to not oppose two of them and authorize you to move forward with that?
Yes.
Okay, so I move that we accept staff recommendation, that the commission goes on record as not opposing either of those two settlements, and that we authorize and direct staff to move forward to communicate that to BPA within the time allowed.
I have a motion from Chair Tankersley. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Commissioner Tate. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously, 3-0. Unless I again haven't scrolled down far enough, I would like to say that this meeting is adjourned.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie, John, thank you very much for taking care of this. This is,
Okay.
and please tell PPC we're pleased with what they accomplished.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care. Okay, bye, Kat.
Recording
Bye.
has stopped.